It all began on the cosmic chrono marker. It seemed like any other day, but I had finally reached my breaking point. There was a member of our crew named Oliver. His official title, given by our captain, was Crisis Engineer. In reality, Oliver was little more than a glorified janitor. He only cleaned when he felt like it, and even then, the cleaning drones did a far superior job. The truth was, Oliver contributed nothing of real value. He spent his days lounging around, doing as he pleased. The only reason for his presence on our ship was his long-standing friendship with the captain. Normally, this wouldn't be an issue, as our crew often operated on the basis of connections due to the nature of our contract work. The veterans of the crew had come to terms with it, having grown accustomed to his idleness over time. However, my companions and I were getting fed up with Oliver. He mooched off our captain and gave nothing in return. The only time he ever did anything was when he felt like it, usually out of boredom. Sometimes you would find him in different rooms just staring at the wall or doing nothing. He knew I despised him and tried to come up with various excuses, like checking if anything was different or if the paint had faded. Before you ask about his engineer title, I looked into his background. No, he never had any such training. He went to school to be a pilot but dropped out halfway through when he became infatuated with a female of his species. It was easy to find out because Oliver was an old college roommate of our captain. Now he was just sitting around worthlessly, feeding off our captain's resources and giving nothing in return. I mean, he could at least try to do something. He could at least try to act like he wasn't mooching. So, I plucked up the courage and decided to talk to our captain about our resident Oliver problem. But he just brushed me off. I told him bluntly that Oliver was a freeloader who was just using him. The captain responded by saying he was glad I cared about him and his ship, and that was why he hired me, because he knew I was a good person. However, he also mentioned that every ship needs a human touch and added firmly, "Let's not discuss this again." I couldn't bear to see Oliver siphon off our captain's kindness, so I got together with the rest of the crew and started a petition. The captain owned our ship. He could choose to ignore it, and judging by his attitude, he probably would. I just wanted him to know that I wasn't alone, that many of his crew felt the same way about Oliver. Then it happened. Before I could turn in my petition, I had almost all the signatures of those who agreed with me. There were a few who hadn't signed because they were hesitant, but I was going to get their signatures. Well, at that point, I guess it didn't really matter. We were all dead. It was a normal routine fuel stop. We stopped at a gas giant because it had a lot of the gases we needed to keep our hyperdrive functioning. Our real engineers had figured that part out, but now it had stopped. My screen was flashing red, and we might as well have been dead. Our normal sublight engines were working normally, so we could travel around the system all we wanted. But the system wasn't inhabited. This wasn't a popular stop. By the time another ship stopped to refuel, we would probably all be dead. My arguments with Blake didn't matter anymore. I deleted the petition from my pad and resigned myself to my fate. You might be wondering what our actual engineers were doing. Well, they just sighed and went to the mess hall. They could build a hyperdrive from scratch, but they couldn't diagnose a problem with it. Everyone knew that hyperdrives were extraordinarily complex creations. A small mistake could set them off with an explosion large enough to destroy a small planet. Sure, you could build a hyperdrive, but once they went online, they ran on their own. There was no shutting them down, no troubleshooting, and no repairing them. It was impossible to restart them without a stellar collector nearby. That's why they were so expensive. So, we were all resigned to our fate, everyone except me. I ran to the captain's quarters and woke him up, looking for something, anything, to get us out of this situation. We could probably rearrange the ship to grow the food we needed to survive, maybe even live out our lives in the middle of nowhere, but that wasn't the way I wanted to go. On a ship in the middle of nowhere with nothing to do. I began to understand how Blake felt. The captain just grumbled, "Let Blake take care of it," without even looking at me, and went back to sleep. Blake, that's right. He was our crisis engineer, wasn't he? It was time to find out how useful he really was. I didn't feel like picking on him anymore. We were going to be stuck here together for a while, and everyone knows how crazy people can get. But I couldn't let this opportunity pass. This was a crisis, and a small part of me hoped that Blake's title meant something. I marched to his quarters and knocked on his door. After a while with no response, I used the crisis protocol to force the door open. No one was there. I looked in the mess hall, the medical bay, everywhere I could think of, and he was nowhere to be found. Then, as I rushed to the engine room, I saw it. The ship's power flickered and everything returned to normal. Blake emerged from the engine room, covered in oil and gunk of various colors and terrible smells. He wiped the sweat from his brow and, seeing me standing there, shouted in a calm and undisturbed voice as if everything was normal. "Hey, you might want to get out of the way. There's a stinker coming through, and he's got a first-class ticket to the showers. I'm sure you don't want to catch any of my gunk, do you?" I was mortified. I slowly moved out of his way and watched him leave. After coming to my senses, I ran to the engine room, and there was no one there. It was just Blake. Did he fix it? Was his title not just for show? Later, in the mess hall, I heard the captain address our other engineers. "Blake says you forgot to replace the biofilters in the hyperdrive fueling bay. You know how dangerous that is. We could all be dead because of your mistake. Look, I know it was a simple mistake. Don't worry, he's already replaced them and cleaned it up a bit. But be more careful next time. The lives of everyone on our ship depend on your work, understand?" "Oh, give them a break, Captain. It was just a simple mistake," Blake replied with his usual calm demeanor. But the look of horror on the other engineers' faces told a different story. They weren't afraid of their punishment, just a little docked pay, but they were horrified at how bad this could have gone. "Don't worry, guys, the crisis function caught it in time. It was a simple fix. Learn from the mistake and let's all move on. We'll do better next time, right?" They all shook their heads at Blake's remark as he and the captain walked away, leaving them to sulk. I walked over and butted in. "I'm sorry to ask, but what's wrong with Blake? I don't mean to be rude, but he has no engineering background whatsoever, right? How is it that he could fix a problem that you guys couldn't even diagnose?" "He's a human being," they replied, looking at me curiously as if it were common sense. The lead engineer, probably sensing my confusion, spoke up. "No one quite understands why, but the human brain is simply wired differently. They're not necessarily smarter, but they can easily see patterns and connect dots that no other species can even fathom. You've heard that humans are crazy, right? That's usually because they see something we just can't. They intuit it. A single human can single-handedly perform the tasks of several of our best AIs at once. It's just natural to them." I still didn't fully understand, but I understood enough. I came to realize how mistaken I was when Oliver saved my life. It became clear that having him on board was invaluable simply because he was human. Later, after we had unloaded our cargo, I approached Captain Reynolds to apologize for my earlier outburst about Oliver. His response was straightforward. "I noticed you talking to the other engineers earlier. I assumed they had informed you about the importance of having humans on board. Honestly, I thought everyone knew. I figured you were just venting steam. Sorry, I should have explained better. Look, Oliver is the hardest worker on my crew. It might not seem like it, but he knows this ship better than anyone here. Take a look at this." He handed me a tablet displaying a list of small ship parts, mostly common items like light fixtures and wall plating, but also including biofill for the hyperdrive, coagulants for the sublight drive, and a component with an unfamiliar name and a significant price tag. "So, you noticed," Captain Reynolds continued. "I'm buying 2 of these today. I understand your surprise, but when Oliver insists we need something, I don't hesitate. That's why I'm getting an extra one, just to be safe. If Oliver suggested buying an entire new ship, I'd do it without a second thought, even if it meant scrapping this perfectly good one. It would cost me a fortune, maybe all my savings, but that's how much I trust Oliver. My engineers feel the same way. He's pulled us out of more tight spots than I can count." Reflecting on his words, I recalled my old mentor, the man I once co-captained with. He used to say that every ship needs a human touch. Initially, I hired Oliver out of familiarity and knowing he was a good, honest man, but initially, I wasn't convinced he could deliver. However, after he fixed a burst pipe with duct tape and ensured our safe return to port, my doubts started to fade. He gave me a list of parts we needed, Captain Reynolds continued. At first, I thought it was luck that the fix held and that he was trying to prove himself. But after more thorough inspections, my engineers agreed with him on every count. They hadn't even noticed the potential issue until I asked them to check. The one item on his list they disagreed with was actually fine at the time, but I took a risk and bought it anyway. And what happened next? Captain Reynolds asked rhetorically. That exact part failed and left us stranded. The fact is, Oliver knows this ship better than I ever could, better than my best engineers. He may not have a formal education or polished methods, but I listen to every word he says because without him, my crew and I would likely be dead many times over. Captain Reynolds gestured around the ship, which was over 350 human years old yet still operated like new. Oliver has saved me enough credits to buy 3 of these ships. You, I think, will make a fine captain one day. Just remember what you've learned today. No matter what challenges you face, even if your crew opposes you or questions your decisions, remember that every ship, no matter how advanced, needs a human touch. Your presence brings intuition and ingenuity that no machine can replicate in the cold vastness of space. It's your humanity that turns survival into true living, and your resilience that anchors hope in the darkest voids. Never forget the unique value you bring to the mission and the irreplaceable role you play. This version provides a more detailed explanation while maintaining the essence of the original story, with adjusted character names and a clearer narrative flow.